All right, we're on the record of García in Oaxaca. Defendants are present with the defendant Oaxaca appearing 977B through counsel. All counsel are present. The Spanish interpreter whose oath is on file is present. If I can have the identifying information of the interpreter, please.
Jane Hudson, H-U-D-S-O-N, court verified, as court certified, Spanish interpreter, 300-401, oath on file.
Thank you. Tonight I serve for pretrial. Counsel for Defendant Garcia has timely filed a motion to continue. I've already indicated on our last proceeding that the counsel had good cause. I do have to make a few comments. I've read and considered the motion and the people's non-opposition to the continuance. Counsel has made his motion to continue on two major grounds. One is recent discovery, that is good cause. Two, the jurors and witnesses must wear masks. He calls the witnesses anonymous. It's a Sixth Amendment violation, and masks render the witnesses faceless, and counsel must see the faces of the jurors. I do not find that to be good cause to continue. The most recent case in this issue is People v. Arredondo. It's A-R-R-E-D-O-N-D-O at 8 Cal 5th, 694. In that case, it held that the confrontation rights of the defendant were violated, where the victim, who was age 18, testified with a computer monitor positioned so that the victim and defendant could not see each other. It held that that particular accommodation was not justified by the fact that the victim started crying. The Arredondo court held that the court is not precluded from ordering an accommodation to witnesses older than age 13, other than closed circuit television. And I need not go on further from there. This is not the type of case as was Arredondo. This is not the type of case as in Coy versus Iowa, that's COY at 487 U.S. 1012, which had held that a screen between that case, a child witness and the defendant, that is specifically designed to enable the witness to avoid viewing the defendant, that allows the defendant to see a dim view of the witness through the screen, was a denial of the right of confrontation. And as such, this would not be an anonymous witness, as counsel would have the identification of the witness. Until there's a California case, assuming that on the next date we are still under a mask mandate, and I have no idea whether we're going to be or not, but until there's such a published California case, I do not find it to be a denial of the right of confrontation. The same with the faces of the jurors wearing masks. This is a statewide mandate. Counsel can see the demeanor of the jurors. The only thing that is covered is the nose and mouth. As I stated earlier, counsel does have good cause. The people have conceded counsel has good cause because of the discovery. With that in mind, the continuance is granted. Now we have an issue as to the calendar.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Of course.
There are, with regard to the mask mandate, obviously that's a sort of a bone of contention, for lack of a better phrase, for us, but it's immaterial at this point.
At this point, yes, I understand. I agree.
And who knows when or if the mask mandate will be in place at that time. We'll address it at that time. So I appreciate the court's guidance and putting up some guardrails in terms of the Arredondo case and how it held, and that will help guide us as we move forward.
I would be shocked if the mask mandate is still in let's say, the existence by the time we try this case. Then again, I'm in shock that it's still in existence today.
Right.
I didn't expect that.
That makes two of us.
So, with apologies to counsel, I have an issue with the calendar. I have trials set all the way through not through next year, but into a good part of next year, including an 8-week special circumstances 2-defendant murder case. I can make this promise to counsel, and I'll tell counsel momentarily, I'll tell them right now, the first date I have open on my calendar right now appears to be the first week of May. With that said, if for some reason that trial that I have is now set in March gets continued, and that's set at the very beginning of March, I will notify counsel with all due speed as soon as I hear, and perhaps this can be advanced. I apologize to counsel. All counsel here are experienced. They know the issues that goes on in the ninth floor. And right now it's beyond my control.
Understood. I do want to, if I could, Your Honor, the court indicated when the court began its comments by saying I had already indicated at a prior hearing that the court was inclined to grant the 1050 and find good cause. That wasn't actually a hearing, and I want to make sure that we do memorialize the circumstances of that conversation. That was a phone call between and among the court, who kindly agreed to get on the phone with Mr. Siegel and myself, but it was not reported, or at least I don't believe it was reported.
Stand corrected. I mean, Brooks, was that recorded? Do we know? Was that recorded?
The date? I think it was.
It would have been September 26th.
Now you take a look.
I'm sorry, August 26th.
If I may look at one more thing, please.
I don't believe it.
And counsel, if you're right, I apologize. And yes, I apologize. This was an informal hearing with counsel and the people.
Right.
And it was relating to discovery. I made certain views known. With that in mind, I stated that there would be good cause for continuance. And I made that promise to all counsel, and you are correct. Thank you for the correction.
So if I could just elucidate for a
Please.
quick second about that.
Go ahead.
I think the record does deserve to be sort of fleshed out where that's concerned. To take us back to August 26th, I received a phone call. I'm sorry, that may not be true. I received a communication. I don't remember if it was a phone call or if it was an email from Mr. Siegel, who indicated that he would like to get on the phone with the court. There was an issue that he wanted to raise. It dealt with some discovery, and I accommodated him and said, sure, if you have something to say, let's get on the phone and do it. And the court was equally accommodating, if not more so, took time out of its schedule, and the three of us got on the call. During the course of that conversation, Mr. Siegel revealed what can only be described as extraordinarily troubling information. This isn't just, and I don't believe that the court would couch this as simply a discovery motion or a discovery issue. This goes far beyond that. Mr. Siegel indicated to the court and to counsel, to me, that, quote, the day before, which would have been August 25th, he started, and I'm quoting, because I wrote copious notes about it, he, quote, started going through the text messages of the Jane Doe's phones. And he was troubled by certain things that he began to find, and the next morning, and I think our call, Your Honor, maybe the court can correct me, I think it was late morning, maybe 11, maybe noon, something like that, because I remember Mr. Siegel specifically saying, I had time to go through even more, hundreds of more messages this morning, and decided to make this call to Mr. Jackson, or to make this request to get Mr. Jackson on the phone with the court. Obviously, that is an enormous revelation that Mr. Siegel and the prosecution team, quote, started going through these messages just about 30 days before trial, given the fact that we, the defense, have been asking, begging, and demanding of the prosecution to allow us access to those phones and the data underlying those phones, the data on those phones, of all the Jane Does. Specifically, in this case, Jane Doe 1, 2, 3. And we have been told over and over and over again. Number one, we have gone through all those phones. The court knows this. I mean, this isn't a new thing. The media knows this. Everybody in the audience knows this, because we've had this conversation so many times. We've gone through all the phones. We have gone through and reviewed every bit of data. You have all relevant and material data, and there is no discoverable or Brady or exculpatory information for you. You're just asking to go through those phones as a fishing expedition. As Mr. Siegel continued to, and I have to give him credit for making this call. It's his obligation to do. Should have been done 2 years ago. But I give him credit for at least elucidating on what he found on the phone. We have still not had access to all of the text messages to which they have access, and I'll describe that in just a second. He indicated that there were 5 categories, and the court will recall this, 5 categories of information that were of concern to him that he believed could, in his words, potentially be discoverable. That is the biggest understatement I think I've ever heard in the practice of law. The 5 categories are the following. Some or all of the JD's use of drugs, some or all of the JD's sexual conduct. That's number 2. Number 3, some or all of the JD's mental health issues. Number 4, some or all of the JD's being involved in theft, admitting to theft and conspiracy to commit theft. Some or all of the JD's, and this is the one that caught the court's attention most and caught my attention most, statements between and among the JD's indicating an intent to set up the defendant for money. Mr. Siegel went on to say, I think Mr. Jackson might consider this Brady, so in an abundance of caution I'm bringing this to the court's attention. And the court actually laughed out loud and said, in the last 5 minutes, what I've heard, Mr. Siegel, I find good cause. I'm telling you for guidance, because I think Mr. Siegel then went on to say, I'm asking for the court's guidance as to what to do. Of course, this court has made it vastly clear. It is not a discovery referee. That is not something that the court's willing or has been willing to engage in. And the court said, Mr. Siegel, you need to turn all that over. And it was shortly thereafter that the court said, is there anything else? Mr. Siegel said no. I think he said something about a protective order, and we ended the call. And I think that's a relatively fair recitation of that call. What's most troubling is that not only is this additional discovery, this isn't, a car was searched and a driver license got stuck between the seat and the console and the police officers forgot to log it, now they're turning that over. This is the central series of issues that we have been asking for in terms of discovery related to the Jane Does for 2 solid years, while my client has sat in custody waiting patiently on ostensibly a no bail hold, a $90 million bail. Mental health issues, theft issues, issues related to drug use, issues related to sex and sexual conduct, issues related to a specific intent to set up the defendant in a way that is exactly how the defendant appears to have been set up. We have come to court on numerous occasions, too numerous to even count, and we've said we would like access to the Jane Doe's phones. And the court has said, and I'll use the court's words, as best I can, I'll summarize. The court has said, look, I'm not a discovery referee, and it's not my job, my duty, nor my place to go through all of the prosecution's evidence, which we sort of asked. We didn't think we could trust them to give us everything we wanted and everything to which Mr. Garcia is entitled, and we asked the court to intervene. The court said, gently, I am not going to accept that invitation, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Mason. The prosecution knows their job. And if they don't turn something over, if they refuse, if they hide, if they conceal evidence, if it turns out to be Brady, they do so at their peril. Ms. Fusco, Mr. Siegel, Ms. Plisner have all been on the record. Ms. Fusco actually pounded her fist on the table, I recall, and pointed over to this side of the table and said, how dare they accuse us of holding back information? She put in a motion that she signed. The people do not dispute that they have a duty to provide all relevant evidence as statutorily and constitutionally required. And the people have done so. The people have reviewed the devices in full. That's not a small statement. The people have reviewed the devices in full for relevant data and exculpatory evidence. tagged the relevant artifacts in Axiom, identified them in reports of investigation, provided those reports of investigation to the defense, and made the tagged artifacts available. In other words, they've done everything that they needed to do. They've looked at all the evidence, they've looked at all the phones, they've made a comprehensive review of the data, and made a determination there's no relevant, material, or exculpatory information in any of it. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Mason, go away. You can't see the phones. And 31 days before this case was supposed to go to trial, this is revealed. So one of two things is true, and it's binary. Either they knew that they had this information and they made false statements, knowing false statements to this court and to counsel, officers of the court, or they hadn't reviewed it, as Mr. Siegel suggested, and they still made false statements to the court and to officers of the court. There is no third option. We are extraordinarily troubled by this. Obviously, as the court indicated, its calendar is relatively jammed. We are going to need time to go through these data. To date, as we sit here, notwithstanding the passage of time after this phone call with Mr. Siegel and the court and myself, for the first time, we received the first text message that's reflective of this conversation, and that was yesterday afternoon at, I want to say it was about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Your Honor, what we received yesterday is one, and I want to be clear about this, it's one text string from one conversation from one Jane Doe phone, and it took 3 hours for a hyperspeed computer to just download that data. There's 15,000 text messages in the download from yesterday. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to. We got it around 1 o'clock, probably by 4 o'clock it was downloaded, and we began scrolling through it. That's not, I think the prosecution has 7 phones from the Jane Does in their possession. Some of the Jane Does had multiple phones, which they took and made mirror images of and downloaded. We still don't have any of that. I would guess, and by the way, not for nothing, but just to illustrate the frustration and the inaccurate and false statements that have been provided to us, Steve Stover seems like a nice enough guy. Don't know what his motivation would be for doing this or saying this, unless he just was either acting at the behest of one of the deputy AGs, or he just was not competent to make the statement. He said the Jane Doe phones, all of them together, everything, reflected about 35,000 text messages, which we thought was a pretty big number. 35,000, that's not nothing. And Jane Doe 3's phone has 7,000. Well, we only got one string from Jane Doe 3's phone yesterday. It was 15,000 text messages. So even that was false. Not a single thing that the prosecution has told us about the actual phones and the data underlying those phones has been accurate. Not a single thing they've told this court has been accurate, and we are extremely and deeply troubled by that. And so we intend to utilize our time wisely, the time that the court is graciously giving us, I think constitutionally has to give us, in order for us to get prepared for this case. We will be bringing a series of motions. We will ask the court to review, re-review under a 995 motion. We will ask the court to review. I'm not asking the court to do it today, because it's sort of hitting everybody like a bucket of ice water at this point because of this late discovery. We'll be asking the court to reopen a 1054.1 motion, which we've already made, and it's already on the record. It was denied, with the exception of simply ordering the prosecution to do its job, which it clearly, abjectly has not done. We will be asking the court to entertain a terminating sanctions motion. We'll be asking the court to review an OSC raise sanctions.
One moment. Okay, thank you. The interpreter had to change. Go ahead.
Good. And we're going to be, I think most importantly, we're going to be asking for an evidentiary hearing. These are the things that we will ask the court to entertain. We will obviously utilize, be mindful of the court schedule. These are not small issues. These are relatively large issues, including the evidentiary hearing that we expect. And I believe the court would be required to hold at this point to find out exactly what happened. What was the motivation behind these false statements? We know that they were false. I mean, the court's heard the prosecution say, we've looked at everything, we've turned everything over. And we also know that less than 2 weeks ago, there was a huge revelation that they hadn't looked at everything and they hadn't turned everything over. So something's got to give, and we're going to be asking the court to entertain those issues.
I'm not requiring it, but if the people wish to make a response.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I know Ms. Fusco wants to address some of the legal issues, but given the fact that Mr. Jackson referred to comments that I allegedly made during this phone call, I do want to correct the record as to some of those comments. First of all, with respect to my review of those text messages, what I indicated on the phone was that I had conducted a recent review of those text messages in preparation for trial, since I'm going to be handling the examination of those witnesses. I never indicated to anyone that no one else had ever conducted a review of that material. In fact, the defense has reported investigation 79, where our agent Joe Sadusky conducted a what looks like a comprehensive review of the content of Jane Doe, of the materials that were extracted from Jane Doe 3's phone. And we indeed made numerous written disclosures of the contents of the phones back then. And they've had that material for well over, for quite a while. So over a year, in writing those disclosures. Second of all, so my comments about recent review had to do with me personally reviewing certain text messages that I had not reviewed prior in preparation for trial. I was not conducting, that was my role in this. Second, with respect to the substance of some of these things, and the one thing I might have said during the hearing, and I don't think even Mr. Jackson mentioned today, but I might have said that some of these messages were sent and received during relevant time periods, during the time that we've alleged some of these crimes occurred. That was a misreading of my notes, and this is all going to be, the messages speak for themselves. The defense has them now. All of these messages are several months, that I refer to, are several months after the allegations against Mr. Garcia. But with respect to the substance of them, I never said, all of the I would say 99% of the messages that I had reviewed at that point, and there were the messages that we sent over yesterday. It's a very long email string between Jane Doe 2 and Jane Doe 3, mostly. And these are conversations that occur over several months. And so this is all after everything has happened and the girls are past all of this. So to the extent I said something different during the phone call, that was not accurate. And it's obvious from the messages, the dates. So with respect to the theft, I did not say that all of the Jane Does were involved in theft. I said that one of the Jane Does who were participants on those participants in those text messages had mentioned taking some underwear and I think some clothing on a couple of occasions from a store, and had talked prospectively like, hey, let's go take some eyelashes from Target. I don't know if that occurred or not. That is what I said. That's what the text messages show. So that, we don't have to take my word for it over Mr. Jackson's. That's what the text messages show. With respect to the use of drugs, what I said was that there was discussion between those two Jane Does, and I'm not talking about the others, I'm talking about those two, 2 and 3, of basically using what's, I think, called wax. It's like a concentrated cannabis. There's some discussion about that. That is not a crime of moral, the use of marijuana is not a crime of moral turpitude. It would normally not be admissible for impeachment, but there is some discussion about those two Jane Does talking about using essentially marijuana. As far as sex, these two young ladies are talking to each other privately about relationships that they have with other boys. That's it. That is extremely unlikely to be admissible. And this, remember, several months after everything with Garcia. Highly unlikely that something like that would be admissible or material. Then, as far as mental health, what I indicated and what the messages show is that these girls are depressed and distraught, and they talk about about how they're feeling. Remember, this is a few months after they've been through everything alleged in this case, not to mention the ordinary teenage angst kind of stuff. And then with respect to set up the defendant, I did not say that they discussed setting up the defendant for anything. Remember, this conversation, and by the way, that message about doing that, about rejoining the group and getting paid for having sex with Mr. Garcia, that was disclosed in Report 79 over a year ago. I was mistaken about that. That actually was disclosed. But more than that, Your Honor, this is something that occurs, again, not prospectively, hey, let's set up Mr. Garcia. This is something that happens months after all of this is over. And they are talking in jest, facetiously, and then I think after that they talk about some completely different subject. It's clear in context, which I didn't have a chance to explain to the court during our phone call, when these messages are viewed in context, it will be clear to everyone that this is a little bit of, I guess you'd call it gallows humor about what had happened to them. That's it. That's what's in those messages. I just wanted to correct the record as to what I had said, because I think it was characterized as a lot more than what I actually at least tried to communicate to the court. And again, no one has to take my word over Mr. Jackson's word. They have the text messages. That's what they say.
And Your Honor, I would like to just dovetail on that. I mean, Mr. Siegel was trying to clarify the things that were said by counsel that misstated his prior comment. And as with everything else, in attempt to project a false narrative in this case, counsel continues to make false accusations, completely exaggerates facts, takes a huge leap with every single thing. Mr. Siegel says, I was reviewing these messages yesterday. All of a sudden it turns into no one on the prosecution team has ever reviewed a single thing in this case. This is the type of exaggeration that they have made with every single fact in this case, Your Honor. They have made huge leaps on the content of the messages, and everything said by counsel, and including in court, on the phone. Since the time of that teleconference with the court, Your Honor, there had been numerous exchanges between counsel. And so I want to make sure that the record is clear, because they do continue to make false accusations of hiding evidence, et cetera, et cetera. What happened was that we were reviewing evidence. I think it was actually in response to a request from counsel for copies of things that they had not viewed, okay? Not to say that they were not available to them, they had been. But they specifically were asking for it. We were trying to accommodate them. In the process of reviewing what had been provided, Mr. Siegel was concerned that we had not specifically copied these particular items to send to counsel. And we did not have time to drill down on the issue of whether it had actually been made available, because the discovery cutoff was the following day. The people did the absolute right thing, Your Honor, and brought it to their attention and to the attention of the court. Since the time of that phone call, we actually have been able to drill down on the issue and discovered that this evidence, all of the Jane Doe 3 evidence that we're talking about here in court today, Your Honor, has been available to them for quite some time. They were put on notice. There was a report, number 79, which was disclosed to them on July, I believe it was July 20th or July 30th of 2020, which specifically references this CD that we're talking about, that Mr. Siegel had been looking at. It was produced to them then the prelim occurred, and after that, the people were ordered to disclose the names of the Jane Does, etc. We went back, we provided unredacted copies of multiple reports, including that same one. Also, Your Honor, in February of 2021, and I do have Mr. Stover on standby, and I think he would definitely take issue with comments of counsel to the effect that he has done something nefarious in this case, which is outlandish, unfounded, and completely unprofessional of counsel to insinuate. But Mr. Stover sat for a week in Commerce, Your Honor, to accommodate the defense request to review relevant evidence which the people had tagged as to multiple devices, including the Jane Doe 3 device and other devices. Did they look at anything substantive during that time, Your Honor? No. They sent their expert, who showed up on 2 of the days, while they had reserved 5. He showed up on 2 of the days, and all he was interested in were word counts, message counts, then wanted to just be able to use their own search terms, to review entire phones, which they were not entitled to look at. Did not want to look at any of the substance, and this is all detailed in Mr. Stover's report. Did not look at anything of substance. And aside from those 2 days that Mr. Green was in Commerce, Your Honor, incidentally, I don't think Mr. Green works for Mr. Carey. The charges as to Jane Doe 3 pertain to Ms. Oaxaca. Those are the only charges that pertain to Ms. Oaxaca. So, as far as we know, although we provided the same reports to Mr. Carey, nor anyone representing him, has ever shown up in Commerce to review any of this evidence that has been available to them. Aside from the 2 days that Mr. Green was in Commerce with Mr. Stover, carrying on a bunch of nonsense instead of looking at the actual substantive evidence, aside from that, Your Honor, and I looked at the log myself and counted up, the defense has spent a total of 5.5 hours in Commerce in the 2 solid years that this case has been going on, to use Mr. Jackson's own comments about how much time has passed. Over 2 years, Your Honor, 5.5 hours. And they're so worried about the substance of this case, purportedly. Your Honor, they have been asking for unfettered access to the Jane Doe phones all this time. Frankly, the people are just at a point where we would like to just get to the substance of this case instead of letting time pass and allowing counsel to just continually try to manufacture Brady and other discovery issues. At this point, Your Honor, although we don't believe we are required to, we don't think that we need to, but we want to provide copies of the Jane Doe phones or devices, save child porn, and I believe the court previously stated that contact lists are off limits to them. But we will be providing those copies of those devices to them, aside from those items that I just mentioned, in an effort to just get to the substance of this case and get this case to trial. rather than continue to have false accusations flying so that they can try to divert attention from the actual facts of this case, which are overwhelmingly that show the guilt of the defendants in this case.
All right, thank you. Mr. Carey, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were invited to participate in the conversation, the telephone conversation. You chose not to.
That's correct. I was in court. I spoke to Mr. Jackson, and he relayed the contents of the conversation to me, so I effectively waived my part.
Again, as I've been saying for the last couple of years, I am not leaving you out of anything.
I understand.
If you want to say anything at this time, go ahead.
Well,
And again, I'm not using this as a forum
sure.
for a boxing match. I've been letting counsel vent, basically, and keeping quiet. If there's anything you want to say, go ahead and say
Yes,
it.
just briefly, I was going to stay at it, but Ms. Busco just mentioned me and some invitation for me to come to Commerce and look at all their discovery. I'll search for that invitation in my email inbox. But on the one hand, she's saying we've had 2.5 years to go look at all their evidence. But on the other hand, she's saying, okay, finally we'll turn it over. So if we had all this time to look at it, what does she need to turn over? It's just utterly confusing.
Darned if I do, darned if I don't, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, counsel.
I mean, she's actually right.
Sword
when
in
she
the
says
shield.
that. She's right when she says that. I just don't.
Befuddling.
I'm just trying to get the discovery. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background. Every time I reply, look, I just want the evidence that applies to my client. I still don't have it, and I'm still confused. I know the court doesn't want to be a referee. I'm still confused as if I'm supposed to go search their warehouse for the evidence relevant to my client, or if they're going to give it to me. So I don't want to get the court involved, but I'm just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, because I don't want to be here in May when we actually are going to try the case and be told once again that it's my fault for not going to their warehouse to search for my discovery.
All right. I've heard enough. I don't need any responses from anybody anymore. You vented, and that's all this was for. This was not for any motions, and I kept quiet. Before we pick a date, there's only one thing I'm going to say. And again, I'm not casting aspersions as to anybody. The only thing I would say is as I would do in any case, and as I do in every case, I would urge counsel to meet, confer, and if there's a possible resolution in this matter, pursue it. I'm amenable to almost anything. Counsel knows the type of cases that I try in this court, among which are 30 death penalty cases. So I'm used to complex cases. But again, if there's any resolutions, I would urge counsel to meet, confer, see what can happen. In any event, let's pick a date.
The only piece of housekeeping left is we were informed after the fact that this court had signed a protective order.
I did, as I would in any case.
Understood. There are a couple of issues in that protective order. The most salient of which, Your Honor, I will bring to the court's attention. I think it's paragraph 8. The reason that we didn't sign it and would not sign off on it is because it disallows us from even presenting the data that we now are going to get, the exculpatory data, to my own client and to Ms. Oaxaca and Mr. Carey. That is I believe it's completely inappropriate. It may have been an oversight on the court's part, but I would ask the court to reverse its order as it pertains to that. Obviously, I have no...
Let me paragraph 8.
I think so.
Under no circumstances shall the records be downloaded or imputed into any computer program or internet website.
It must be 7. Something like share it with the defendant.
The records or copies thereof will not be given to the defendants without the court's approval following a notice hearing.
Correct. I have to be able to discuss this issue and show them to my client.
Mr. Siegel, you drafted the order. Is there any issue with that?
Your Honor, there still are concerns as to the Jane Doe's privacy, and I don't believe that it is necessary to actually show the defendant the contents. Of course, they can discuss facts with them, but this is really not different than the court's prior orders. So I don't think that it should be deleted.
the court previously said, and rightfully so, you looked down from the bench and said, Mr. Jackson, I don't believe I could ever make a legal order that disallowed you from sharing information.
No, that's correct, and that's not what paragraph 7 says. You may share, you may show, you may not give.
Correct, fine, and
that's what
fine.
it says.
I read it more broadly, and I think Ms. Fusco just corroborated my reading of it. She doesn't think I should even be able to show it to him. It's ridiculous.
That's not what the order says. And as every word has meaning, and was not specifically included or excluded is included, the records will not be given to the defendant without the court's approval following the notice hearing.
There's
nothing saying it can't be shown or discussed.
I will govern myself accordingly, Mr.
Can I ask a question? I get what the court's saying, but if I don't give the messages to my client, I'll have to sit with her in a room for probably 3 weeks.
I understand. I'm sorry.
So I can give them to her to look at, just so I want to make sure.
You cannot give them to her. You can share them with her, show them to her, discuss them with her.
Okay, so she can come to my office and look at a computer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, date.
Your Honor, I dare say an interim date of...
Oh, there would be many interim dates, but what I do is, the first thing I want to do is set a trial date.
Got it, okay. We're looking in May.
I am.
Remarkably, my calendar is completely free in May.
Remarkably. The case that I have is supposed to end, and nothing's for certain, April 29th.
I would think the court would want a week or so breather at least.
Don't worry about me.
Your Honor, how about the week of the 9th?
That'd be fine. Any particular date? We can set it for May 9, that is 0-10, but you understand we always start on day 0 in this court.
Your Honor, will the court be setting a motion date based on that?
I'll be setting pre-trial dates after this. First thing I want to do is cement the trial date.
May I have just a moment?
Sure. And I take it the estimate is still around 8 weeks?
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
I take it the estimate is still around 8 weeks?
Yes. Thereabouts, Your Honor. 6, 7 weeks.
We'll mark it in for 8.
May 9th is fine, Your Honor.
As 0-10?
As 0-10.
Does that agree with you, Mr. Garcia?
Yes.
And that was in English. On behalf of Defendant Oaxaca, is that agreeable with the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is that, I take it, agreeable with the people?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, this time the matter will be set as day 0-10, understanding that the court will start on day 0, May 9, 2022, 8:30 a.m. The Department of Defendants are ordered to appear. As to the next date for pretrial and whatever motions are noticed, I'm going to inform counsel. I expect to be in constant trial, but that shouldn't stop counsel at all. I just may have to work around whatever schedule I have, but I expect to be in constant trial starting October 4th. But what's a good day for any kind of motions? Or just the next pretrial, whatever's there.
Your Honor, I would think that Your Honor, about a month from now, I think would be satisfactory. Okay. That's fine. Would that put us on the 15th? 22nd.
This court will be dark the week of the 18th of October.
Then let's set it for the 15th if it works for the court's calendar, the Friday before you leave.
All right, we'll be in jury trial that day, so we can try.
Okay.
All right, that's agreeable with all of the parties, by the people?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Ms. Curry?
Yes, thank you.
Matter set October 15, 2021, 8:30 a.m. as far as the pretrial, defendant Garcia's order to appear. As far as Benoit, at this time, he may remain under Penal Section 977B.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you all.
I heard Ms. Fusco indicate that it is the government's intention at this point to make all of the data of all of the change of phones that is available,
Yeah.
not the CP, obviously.
I have never corrected you. This is in federal court. There's no government here, it's the people. But I accept that, and that's what I understood the people to say.
Fine. I would ask that be made in the form of an order. I would ask the court to order the prosecution to timely or forthwith produce those data.
This was an offer by the people. I have not changed any order I made. I accept the offer. I think it's gracious, and hopefully it would be forthwith. Again, I'm not making any order.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
As soon as we'll take a short break to allow the cameras to leave, we're going to call the Durantes matter. Thank you.